2 and 1. We are live. Hello. Welcome to the Masters of Modern live stream.
Here we are.
There have been just bannings all over the place, from historic
looking at me on
to everything looks good. I just have to turn the music down. Bam. No music. Now it's just cam audio, which is us. How's the audio sound, chat? Let us hear. It's 10:30 now.
It's 10:30 now. Are people giving you a hard time about the stream time?
I don't know how time changes work. Hopefully we're good. Oh, it's now. It's now.
It's now.
It's now. Does our audio sound good, chat? Let us know. But welcome to Masters of Modern Hot Take. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bayman.
What's up, everybody? We're here. We're excited. Obviously, this is a banning announcement Monday. These happen now. This is a different schedule now, right? They just sort of do them when they want to?
Yeah, so the way it works is that they realized that having to wait for moments of banning that are pre-scheduled has made it so that they're not versatile enough to really react when there's a real problem. Great examples are Hogak over the summer, where they banned Bridge from Below, and then they had to wait 2 months to ban Hogak, even though after a weekend they were very much aware that they missed the right card to ban.
I'm so proud of you.
That I said Bridge from Below?
You didn't even miss a beat.
That was the one I know how to say.
I know, but I just assumed you would say Ensnare and Bridge.
Well, but that's the one I love. I can't say the names of the things I love.
I'm astounded. You just rolled through that like you had rehearsed it. Are you guys as impressed as I am?
I'm very practiced, all right? We've gone some very formal training since last we were live on how to say words correctly.
Yeah, 100%.
Like Siege Rhino.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at
I did that. That happened.
Guys,
all right.
I'm going to get fired pretty soon.
Oh, mine's a little weird.
Is it? There's a lot of good feedback here too. So let's just keep rolling and we'll kind of adjust as
hopefully
as we
it's
go.
better.
But yes, that's kind of the new system now.
Oh, cool. So I was too close to the mic.
So we now have all this new information, which is that we got Once Upon a Time banned in Modern.
Yep.
We got Underworld Breach banned in Legacy.
Yep.
And we got some adjustments to the historic list in Arena.
Oka Thief of Crowns, Veil of Summer, and Once Upon a Time are now officially banned.
Yep.
Once Upon a Time slowly getting up there with Gitaxian Probe of being banned and restricted in every format.
In historic.
Yeah, it's in historic.
I just mean in historic, which is a function of Arena. For anybody who's
we'll explain what historic is in a second. And then Field of the Dead was unbanned, or unsuspended. So the way suspended works is basically there's a temporary ban list, which is kind of what we've asked for in Modern in some ways. Not necessarily a suspended list, but a watch list, right? So they just take it a step further where it's actually not. They once it's suspended, it's no longer playable in the format.
Right.
But once it's banned, you get free cards, I think is the reason suspended was added. So if something's suspended, you don't get gifted wild cards for it. But once it's banned, I think you do.
Got it.
Now I'm fine if I'm wrong, and chat can let us know. But for those who don't know, Historic is a format that's exclusive to Arena, which is a weird. It's their answer to not having Pioneer or Modern or anything Eternal yet. It's where your cards go when they rotate. They can just add cards. So there's cards legal in Historic that are not legal in Pioneer nor Modern currently.
Yeah, it's an interesting take when we talk about. So the other day, somebody was asking me about Magic, right? This happens in your life, right? Where someone's like, "Oh, I played Magic back in the day. I had Slivers," and you're like, "It's a great game, still around," and you try to explain, and then they're like. You're like, there's this online version called Arena now. And they're like, oh, really? Wow, I can play that? And you say it is actually just Magic. You're playing Magic, and it looks really good. But there are weird differences, something like Historic, where it's one of the only things that exists where it's not a different game, but they're just sort of printing cards into the format. It's kind of like Modern Horizons, I guess.
Yeah, it exists. I don't think it's that weird.
They're not creating cards, though.
It's weird in how it's a format, right? The game works exactly the same, but what they're doing is while they do the work on figuring out what Pioneer Masters are going to look like, there's going to be plural. They are kind of using Historic as this testing ground to print cards into it and see how they do with this card pool. I think from their perspective, it's probably a really interesting testing tool, right? Because they now have hundreds of thousands of games being played of a format where they could be oh, what happens if Fauna Shaman's in Standard?
Right. Well, no, for sure. I mean, it's not the same thing as Modern Horizons, really. But I think what it is that if you were somebody who 15 years ago played Standard and you understood the cycle of Magic, you kind of got it. This is the one major difference where it's they're just like, play with these cards now. They're just available to you all of a sudden, and it's not a set. It's like just a group of cards. But that's like
Legacy has worked that way for a while with the Commander sets, right? And so does does like technically Commander. I mean, like that's what's interesting too is right now there's Brawl, which is a rotating standard format, but eventually I hope that Wizards adds either Historic Brawl that includes all these cool historic cards, like Get Rog Monster was added to Historic. Or they just add Commander, right? Like Commander's the most popular format. They have the top 30 creators, but most of them are doing some type of Commander content. That content does not translate to Arena. So them figuring out just adding Commander to Arena I think once we get one more rotation, I think the card pool is wide enough that they could just add it and the like no one would blink an eye.
Yeah.
And then just start adding the Commander products that come out to Arena when they come out. We'll see how that goes because obviously Commander is also a big focus of Paper Magic.
Yep.
And is a multiplayer format which Arena can't do. But we'll see how that kind of works out. But that's everything we're going to talk about Historic because we have like no opinions.
So we are going to break down all the different bannings. We mentioned a few of them. The other big piece of news that we're going to get to is that there were no bannings in Pioneer. So we're going to break each of these little pieces down. But before we do, I want to remind everybody here who's watching, who's just tuning in, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell below. Obviously, subscribing to the channel and keeping it at your feed is the best thing you can do to help grow the channel. And follow along with everything else we do. But I think without any more shout outs, let's just jump into it. I think let's jump into the big one first. It seems like people are saying if you're a little further from the mic, it's better.
I'm just trying to make it. That's a little too loud. Hello, my name is Alex Kessler, and hopefully that sounds better.
Great. So let's jump into the big one first, because I think Modern is obviously the one that the people are the most sort of, and I want to talk about the Pioneer one as well.
Sure.
But Modern is the big one, because we're obviously a Modern show. And Once Upon a Time is a card, you mentioned, it's getting to that Gitaxian Probe level. But the thing that's weird about it is if you restrict the card, it gets a lot worse, right? Like in any format, because obviously playing one of them is like a lot worse than playing four.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's like very relevant to Vintage, but like...
Yeah, but like, so...
if they restricted it in Vintage, I feel like it would be ostensibly just being banned. Right?
Yeah,
like
you're not gonna play one of these.
Like you're not gonna. It's not like Gitaxian Probe where you still just play the one, right? Like that's a format where just one Gitaxian Probe is still really good. It's not like Brainstorm where just if you draw Brainstorm, it's still really good. It's like 30% of its like usefulness, making it a C of a card, is the fact that if you have it on turn 0, you can cast it for free.
Yeah. Now we saw this coming. We talked about it last week on the show. This was like pretty predictable as far as the banning went. The thing that was interesting about this card to me was when I started to realize, like, so many of the good decks were just made better by this card anyway, right? Like you think about like any of the decks, like the Azusa decks. If you think about those decks, or you think about Tron, like these are green decks that they didn't need the card. They already were just really good decks. Like they were like really, really dominant, like really strong. Mm-hmm. Having just a free way to dig for one of the two things that your deck actually wants, which is an important land or an important creature. Like the card was designed to make those decks kind of unfairly good.
And like they like there were already talks about banning. Oh no, I'm not gonna do it. Oh no, it's not happening. I'm not remembering every card. Why can't I remember this card's name?
What is it? Describe it.
It's a green 1-drop that
Ancient Stirrings.
Damn it! I was doing so good. Why can't I remember Ancient? We need to print that out. Actually, that's what we should do. We should just on the wall have cards.
Yeah.
Those who can't see, we have like a thing with cables on it. We'll just replace the cables with like printed cards of that I can't remember, and then I can read them.
That was Alex.
And life would be great.
That was Alex's the speech moment.
But okay, so Ancient Stirrings like was being talked about a card that people think should be banned. In fact, it was on a list with other cards that have been banned since we were talking about it. Everyone was like, Mox Opal, Faithless Looting, and Ancient Stirrings are all cards that probably should be banned, especially since Preordain and Ponder are all banned in the format. These are comparable power level cards. It's messed up that green has the best cantrip in the format. And then they printed Once Upon a Time, and it was like, oh, well, this is better.
We said this last week on the show. It doesn't feel like the same card. It's not a cantrip. It is a cantrip, obviously, because it puts a card into your hand, but like, it's not. It's like a 2-mana card selection thing that's free at the beginning of the game, but if it's not free, it's like not a very good card.
Well, no, but I mean, like Search for Azcanta was seeing play in Modern, like, and
that's not a cantrip. Like cantrips, in my mind, I understand what you're like. I get where you're coming from. In my mind, a cantrip is something you play for 1 mana that has a marginal effect that gets a card into your hand. That's like
Well, but like Ponder isn't a marginal effect. It's getting one card. It's
rearranging the top 3. Serum Visions has a worse effect, but it still gets you a card.
Well, but would you say Ancient Stirrings is
that's a cantrip? Yeah.
So it's doing the exact same thing Ancient Stirrings is. Just you instead of finding colorless things, you can find creatures.
It just costs 1.
But on average, it costs 1.
Just costs 1. I don't know. Telling Time doesn't feel like a cantrip. Telling Time feels like a card selection spell.
That's wrong.
I realize when you're defining it, you're correct. If the definition of the word is, I think cantrip came from some like D&D thing, and it means like picking up something, right?
Well, but even in Magic's definition, a cantrip is a card you cast and then you draw a card off of it. And that's like the point of playing that card.
Like Cryptic Command is not a cantrip, even though Cryptic Command can draw you a card.
But Cryptic Command does 2 things.
Okay.
It cantrips. That's different. So like that, you're talking about when a card cantrips versus a cantrip. Like this card does is draw you a card. It gives you the card you need when you need it.
Let's ask the chat, guys. When you think of it, I'm not saying the actual definition, but I'm saying when you think of cantrip in your mind, do you think of Once Upon a Time, or do you think about Brainstorm or Ponder or Ancient Stirrings? Like
I think you're on the wrong side of history here.
I'm just asking. Faithless Looting is not a cantrip. It's a card selection spell, right?
No, Faithless Looting is a discard outlet.
Yeah, and a card selection spell.
Sure, but okay. My brain's breaking with that.
The earth is flat.
How wrong you are. All right, so this card was obviously very powerful because they banned it, and it was being played in every format, and it's been banned in almost every format.
I'm wrong. Everybody says I'm wrong.
Oh, am I like behind it? Why is my chat not loading? That's weird. Good. But going on to why the card was banned. I mean, one of the issues is just being very ubiquitous. Getting able to be, like, how many free spells were problematic? How many cost reduction spells were problematic? If you look at like the history of free spells, almost every single time they've done it, it's bad for Magic.
Right.
from Phyrexian mana to Delve. I mean, I guess like Convoke is the closest to it not being a problem, but then also like there are decks that have been very powerful on the back of how powerful Convoke is. So like Wizards just stopped doing cost reduction. It's like almost easy to break, especially the older formats you get into.
Do you want them to stop doing it? We actually were like literally just in Portland. We were hanging out with Professor doing some stuff with Hilarion Community College, and we had a whole conversation about this, about the power of cards, right? Like pushing something. So the whole concept of cost reduction is exciting for players because it harkens back to really powerful things people like doing, but very rarely does it actually work. Do you want them to stop doing cost reduction at all? Or do you just, like, would you be happier if they just didn't do it, period? Or do you like them to keep toying with it to try to find the balance?
I don't think they'll ever find a balance. I think, like, no matter which direction you go into, you're going to find a world where it's breakable. Like, they've all been breakable. Even, like, the suspend ones where you can cascade into them are breakable.
Mox Tantalite has not yet been broken.
Yet. But, sure. But that, on the other end, it's like, not every time they've done a free mechanic or a cost reduction mechanic has every card in that set been broken. Not every one of the suspend for free cards is good. Just enough of them are. Like normally one of the effects, the way they have to make a card like that exciting, it's kind of like Storm, right? They've said we are no longer going to print Storm cards. And the reason we're not going to do it anymore is because we can print Storm cards that aren't too good. That's not hard.
Right.
The issue is then it's boring. It's like, oh, Storm, destroy every artifact. That's actually probably on the more exciting side of things. Or Storm, each creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn.
Yeah, right.
Like,
those ones just aren't good.
For how many times you've Stormed. And that's just like really good overrun. It's more like, and I think they should keep trying, because I also think, like, obviously they're focused on Standard, where most of these mechanics haven't been problematic, right? Like, none of the Delve spells were problematic in Standard. Once Upon a Time was, but like you swing to the fences, and I think I've always been on the side of I would rather Wizards do, and if you look at this list of all of the cards mentioned, all of them were Standard cards.
Yeah.
Like that's what's crazy, is every card talked about on the ban list was printed within the last year.
Once Upon a Time, Oko, Field of the Dead, Underworld Breach,
Golos, Veil of Summer. Yeah, every single one was printed in 2019.
Yeah, so I think that's a problem.
Except for maybe Golos in Brawl, which is a weird counter case, and that would have been printed in It was printed in M2019, which is all basically 2019.
So I think it's worth acknowledging, and we've acknowledged it, and so has Wizards, that like the last year has been pretty tumultuous for Magic. I think it's been exciting to see good cards, but it's also just been like very clear that period of design did not give us a lot of cards that felt particularly fair. A lot of really, really like slanted stuff, which is where we're at. And I think we hope 2021 is...
So that's kind of the way to look at it, is remember everything's on a 2-year cycle. So we're still within the time period where cards are going to be busted. Like if you look at even Theros, like Underworld Breach and Thassa's Oracle, a card that we haven't even gone into but thought was going to be banned out of Pioneer, were both printed in that set. If you go back to Throne of Eldraine, you have obviously very powerful spells from Oko to Once Upon a Time. You go to M20, you get Field of the Dead. If you go to War of the Spark, you have
all of the Planeswalkers.
A library of Planeswalkers that are all not too good, but too good.
I really think we really need to do the re-ranking of Planeswalkers now that we have War of the Spark. The top 30, the top 25, whatever. Yeah. My question is, how many of the top 25 Planeswalkers of all time? Like, if we're going to do just top 25, do you think how many from the last year? Let's go back to Dominaria, because I want to include 5-Minute Teferi. Since 5-Minute Teferi, how many do you think have broken the top 25? 5? 6? 7?
Half.
Like, right? Because it's like Karn, 3-Minute Teferi,
but even
Narset,
like Nissa, who shakes
Teferi.
the world, is better than most things. If you look at like older formats, Jace is seeing a lot more play than most other Jaces have seen play, other than 2. So like, I think it's possible it's half. But
that's an interesting episode.
Future episode, not the hot take on bannings. No. So back to Once Upon a Time. I mean, like the decks that really, the thing I do want to talk about before we get on to Legacy possibly is like the decks that were playing Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
And what do they play instead? And in most cases, Ancient Stirrings is the answer, right? Tron just moves back to Ancient Stirrings. It almost doesn't even blink. All of the Uro-based Primeval Titan decks, not all of them go to Ancient Stirring. Some of them do. Some of them are going to have to find a different way to be more consistent. Now, there are other cantripy cards out there, like Telling Time.
When you say Uro-based, are you talking about like the Azusa decks, like the big mana...
Yeah, like there's 4 different
variants of
them. There's Primeval Titan with Amulet, there's Primeval Titan with just Field of the Dead, like the Bant ones. Uro is also seen in a lot of the snow decks now. Now he's doing something slightly different there. Just because he's a different engine for those decks. And those decks weren't playing Once Upon a Time because they were playing a lot of Planeswalkers. That's kind of the line, right?
Yep.
Once Upon a Time was not played with Planeswalkers. So you're either playing Planeswalkers or playing Once Upon a Time. Yeah. And the format, I think, shifts away from it, though I don't think most of the decks get that much worse.
I just think like the difference, it's a good comparison of Ancient Stirrings versus Once Upon a Time for these decks. I think that is the place to look. And I just think we had a conversation last week on the show about this. Mm-hmm. My understanding of the card Once Upon a Time was kind of flawed when I saw it printed. It didn't like totally make sense to me why it was going to be as good as it was. I got that it would be sweet to get it for free at the beginning of the game, but then we talked about in these bigger mana decks, when you're later in the game, you don't care about spending an extra mana for the card selection.
Right.
And so if you're going to compare the two things, like it just became standard to play that card because why wouldn't you in a deck that's trying to dig for exactly those things?
Which is the problem with free spells, right? Like when it's like, oh, there's a free spell that draws a card. Like there's an argument that most decks that can handle the life total loss should have been playing Gitaxian Probe. And towards the end of Gitaxian Probe's existence, they did,
most
right?
Were,
so like a free spell that gains you real value, in this case, it makes it so you either are going to guarantee hit your land drop early, find a creature you need early, or at the late game when you draw it, just be able to get the card you need. Is really good. And you don't need to spend green mana to play it the first time, so you don't even have the limitation of like Brainstorm. If I don't draw my island or my blue mana producing spell, now Legacy this is rarely an issue, but in modern or more recent formats like Ponder, other cantrips, then I can't use this spell. So I have to be a little bit weighted towards blue. Yeah, Once Upon a Time lets you not. You could splash green for Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, right, because exactly. Early in the game, you can cast it off of not green mana, which is like really, really important. Mm-hmm. I think it is really interesting when you think about the different eras of Modern, because we're obviously doing a banning conversation right now. You can sort of define each of the eras by like what was like that ubiquitous card. And it's weird that in the Faithless Looting era, I guess you would have called it, like the last year or year and a half prior to the banning of that card. Mm-hmm. It seems like it should have been the Faithless Looting Ancient Stirrings era, because like they were like the two things you could do on turn one with like the most powerful decks. But it's almost like after Looting was banned, then the printing of Once Upon a Time almost like invalidated the Ancient Stirrings era. Like it kind of made it super short-lived to actually be the card, right?
I think that was the end of that era, right? There was an era where like you played one of these two cards.
Yeah,
that's what you were doing in Modern, and now we've moved towards. Then Once Upon a Time came in, Faithless Looting was banned, and so then that era ended. Now with Once Upon a Time going away, seeing what the Ancient Stirring decks can start doing. Now, I do think that makes Primeval Titan worse. I think that's the card more than any card that gets hurt by the Once Upon a Time ban the most.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you no longer can just like make sure you find your Primeval Titan when you need it.
Well, I think the other thing too about this is that Opal happened in this time. And the Ancient Stirring decks, half of them really wanted Opal.
Sure.
I would say most of them wanted Opal, actually. Like
I would say a third.
Hardened Scales, Urza decks, Prison decks.
Sure.
Like those are
but
all...
Urza decks would still play.
They're still good. I just mean like Mox Opal was like the card that made it so that like Ancient Stirring's just like playing green in a deck that didn't necessarily want green all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Was just like, yeah, okay. I'm gonna dig for my thing, like, and I'm gonna have this thing that gets me a Mox Opal if I want to pair with my turn 1 play. It just like sped those decks up. There's like a lot less value in just like colorless decks when you don't have a Mox.
Well, except Tron exists, Eldrazi decks are out there,
those decks are still good.
And the Amulet Tank decks, right? Like land decks. The fact that it finds lands is one of the powerful things that Ancient Stirrings always could do. So the fact that you can get any of the lands you might need or your amulet is what those decks will probably look at. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they start playing with stuff like Golos. I mean, like Golos has seen play in those decks before, but now that they have to go back to Ancient Stirrings, being able to find like mini Primeval Titan might actually be a worthwhile endeavor for them. I think this was good. I think that Once Upon a Time, I think we can both admit that Once Upon a Time was a mistake.
I don't know if the card's a mistake necessarily. I like when they push cards. I'm happy it's banned. I think
Sure. I'm not saying I would go back in time and
unmake it.
This was a card I might go back in time and unmake. It was banned in every format so shortly. Same as Oko, right? Like neither of these cards like showed too much of what could have been different. It just was like, oh, here's a card that breaks every format and we have to ban within 3 months.
Yeah, I guess it's the problem with this card is that because it's what we just said a second ago, right? You can cast it off not green to get you green if that's what you need. The fact that this can just be put into a deck and you just get what you need out of it is kind of the issue. Because it's like, if a deck doesn't want to play green and it has a crappy opening hand and this is in the opening hand, it's like, yeah, this is probably keepable, even though the math of the way this deck is constructed is not actually consistent. But I can break the math because I don't have to actually have to cast this card. Right. And it's going to dig me the resource I need anyway.
And like Frank Carson did the math, right? There's a really good article that you can find. I think it's on Channel Fireball where he like broke down the actual math of like how many lands you don't need to play now because Once Upon a Time is in your deck and like what this can do. And that was in standard. When you bring that power level up to modern, where what you're finding is way more powerful lands, way more powerful creatures, it's like very good.
Yeah.
I will say that I think we are in a world like it's going to be interesting to see which decks get better. I think Primeval Titans still stay good. I think that there's a lot of really cool lists that saw play in the last top 8. Like I was kind of walking out of that top 8 saying nothing really needed to be banned. Now I understand why they did this because if you look at it, like I think of the 2 PTQs at Magic Fest Reno, like half the decks had Once Upon a Times in them, but like they were different. Like there was snow ones, there was Uro based ones, there's Prime Time, there was like Amulet, there was Bant. Like there's a lot of different things it was doing. But now that we're past that, looking at like I was messing around last night with the what it called the Fires of Invention, taking turns deck, which is like really sweet and like. Even against Tron, a deck that I would imagine was a bad matchup, I was winning 60% of the time. So like there's a lot of really cool things to do in the format right now, and I'm excited to see where it goes with the like Once Upon a Time ban, like limiting some of the more ramp-based decks.
Well, I think my last thought on Once Upon a Time, just comparing it to other bannings really quickly before we get out of here, or talk about Pioneer, I should say, is that, so think about some of the other cards we compared it to, right? So Cataxian Probe, let's say, compare it to like Treasure Cruise. So cards that are free or provide a tremendous advantage in the middle of the game when you're in like the middle of a combo chain. Those are things that like you can look at it on the surface and go like, in your opening hand this is good, but also the point of this card being so broken is that if I draw this in the middle of a chain, it costs me so few resources to get what I want. That's not Once Upon a Time. All Once Upon a Time does is make decks that were like pretty good, just way better on the first turn, so they're faster, but you don't draw that card in the middle of a combo chain and be like, oh man, more copies of Once Upon a Time, I'm stoked about this. It's like, they're just kind of in your deck and like they're fine, they're good to have, I guess, but like it's really. I think
you're like very underestimating the power of just like look at the top X cards of your library and pick the best card out of them.
No.
For 2 mana.
I do understand that, but I'm saying all the other ones that got banned. So like Mox Opal, for instance, these are all cards that if you have no resources in the middle of the game and you're doing something unfair, like really unfair, those cards don't really cost you much to draw mid-game. They're probably free or nothing to like fill your hand or get you extra mana, whereas this card isn't that. This card is not intended to be part of decks like that because you can't play it for 1 or for 0. It's going to cost you 2, which really means its best function is to have it in the opening hand, make a deck faster, and Modern doesn't really need that. We don't want Modern to be a turn 2 format.
Oh, sorry. Like decks could use that. I see what you're saying. It doesn't need that from the perspective of we don't want it around. It doesn't need that from the perspective of
it's only busted and unfair on the first turn of the game for decks. It just makes decks faster, which is not really what the point.
But that's not really like. Deathray Shaman is busted on turn 1, but the reason it was good was like because Birds of Paradise is busted on turn 1. I can name like 30 cards that are busted on turn 1 and worse in the late game. The problem with Once Upon a Time was that it was busted. It was good all the time and really good on turn 1.
Yeah, it just makes decks faster. That's the point.
But it's not faster; it's consistency, right? You're not like I'm going to win a turn earlier. Like Mox Opal makes decks faster, right? I play this card and I have an extra mana this turn.
Yeah.
I'm farther ahead than I was than my opponent. I almost time walk them by playing this card by discarding a card. Once Upon a Time lets you find a card that you need whenever you need it, but also make sure you hit your land drops on turn 1.
Yeah.
So like it's the turn 1 play is almost more there for like the consistency of the card. Same as like Brainstorm, like it's wrong to play Brainstorm and Legacy on turn 1.
Yeah.
That's a rookie mistake. Unless you need a land or you're playing against a deck that is going off on turn 1 and you need a force will, otherwise you lose.
Yeah.
Don't Brainstorm on turn 1. You Brainstorm on turn 5 because then you're going to be like, oh, I've assembled my threats, but I don't have a removal spell to get through, or I've assembled my removal spells, but I need a threat to be able to do damage or whatever.
Right.
Brainstorm now can find the card you need, knowing what the situation, what your opponent is doing. And that's the power of Once Upon a Time, right? Like that's why these cantrips that are card selection are good. And when they're free, even like a Gitaxian Probe level free, they're extra good. Gitaxian Probe like was a free card that then showed you what your opponent was doing, so you could do whatever you want. It's like ironic that it wasn't banned because it was too good in Storm or too good in Death Shadow. It was banned because it was too good in Infect, because they could, for free, make sure their opponent didn't have a removal spell and go for it. Yeah, I think that Once Upon a Time is a card, like, cantrips are already too powerful, right? Like, the Wizards has stated, consistency for combo decks is bad.
Yep.
Ponder, Preordain, go away. Faithless Looting now, go away. Once Upon a Time, now go away. And, like, I think Ancient Stirrings is next on the block. Because there was a card that was strictly better than it in some ways out there, making it so it was no longer viable, made it so it wasn't seeing play. But now that that card's gone, it's next on the chopping block.
So we'll see what happens.
And the Wizards' philosophy has definitely seemed to have moved towards, we are going to ban more engine cards than we used to.
Yeah.
Right? Between Faithless Looting, between Mox Opal, like, these are cards that Wizards has, like, previously, like, kind of been like, we like the glue that holds our formats together. Now they're like, no, we need to get rid of these cards. They're they're one of the things that are causing problems.
It's like it's banned more on the level of like the Ponder Preordain ban than it is on the Gitaxian Probe ban, but they both get banned, so that's where we're at.
One thing Chad has also brought up, and I actually think I agree, Astrolabe is the other card that, like, is super problematic, and I agree. I think that card also, like, was a mistake. Like, it shouldn't have been printed. Fine, we're glad it got printed. I'd rather Wizards swing for the fences when they're printing cool cards. But Astrolabe almost single-handedly makes it so that snow basics are the only basics you should play in all of Modern, and, like, is allowing these 5-color decks that probably shouldn't be able to pull those mana requirements off too easily. Makes Blood Moon bad, which I guess is good for me, but bad for Magic. I think Magic is in a better place when Blood Moon is too good, which is why I don't want it around. But
really, I feel like Magic's in a good place when Blood Moon's too good. You're saying?
So if Blood Moon is powerful, it means Magic is in a good place, because it means people are playing with more, like, they're like more commonly playing with cool non-basics. They're playing 2 to 3 color decks. Celestial Colonnade is seeing play. Blood Moon is good. When Blood Moon isn't good, in a world like with Astrolabe, where they have, like, weird artifact things that are preventing it from being good to get through it, then it's problematic.
I see what you're saying. Like the functionality of, like, getting greedy to make your deck too powerful, being stopped by one card is fine. But when you have, like, the insurance backup of, I can do whatever I want, and also there's an extra element you can't interact with one card, it's, like, worse.
Yeah, like, Blood Moon is bad, right? I've argued it should be banned for way too many times. I don't think it's good now in a way that needs to be banned, but I think the play style of the card is a net negative. But when the decks it's good again are good, it means it's, like, the format's in a healthy space, right? Like, Blood Moon being a good card means that the format is playing, like, healthy lands, and it prevents people from being 5-color. What Astrolabe does is allows you to just play any land you want, or any color you want, with no cost.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, it's generally a net benefit because it's an artifact that sits in play, draws you a card, and puts you ahead. So, yeah, I think that card is homogenizing the format around itself in a way that's probably a net negative, and I can see it being banned within the next 2 years, if not the next year.
It feels pretty. It feels pretty consistent with the type of card that gets banned. I mean, like right off the bat, it's a card that draws you a card for 1 mana and is colorless effectively, right? That's pretty historically already like, yeah, I don't know if this is like a great thing to have, but then also the fact that you mentioned that it's pushing people to play snow basics. It does feel like you're looking at deck construction now, and you look at modern top 8s, and like everything new that seems to come up with is like that. It's just something that's like based around that. It's like, oh wow, they're playing 4 colors. How are they doing that? Oh, of course, because that's really easy to do now.
Right. I mean, if you looked at the top 8s for Magic Fest Reno, like, yes, Once Upon a Time was pretty ubiquitous, but also there's a lot of really cool 5-color decks. Oh wait, but they're all playing Astrolabe.
Astrolabe, yeah.
And like, are those decks cool, or are they all kind of just doing the same thing and playing the best gold cards under the sun?
It does seem like there's. Yeah, I don't think Astrolabe is long for this world. I don't think it's great. So I do want to say, though, we're going to talk briefly about no Pioneer bannings, and we are going to talk briefly about Underworld Breach.
Sure.
But anybody who's watching here still on the YouTube channel, guys, remember, you can throw in your comments in Super Chat. That is the best way to get our attention. Obviously, we're looking through the chat here and trying to shout people out. But if you do feel like donating, it helps the channel grow. It helps us stay alive and do the thing. So just a quick shout out on Super Chat. Let's talk about Underworld Breach. Yogg will.
Yeah, so... speaking of cards that Wizards has printed that are too powerful.
Because it's funny, because like we've had conversations about stuff that I look at on the surface, and I go like, I don't understand why this is going to get that good. Like, I kind of missed Oko, and I kind of missed Once Upon a Time. Once was a little closer for me. I just missed Oko. This card was like, what is the logic behind printing this card? This is actually just Yawgmoth's Will, but you're printing it into standard. There's no way this card's going to exist.
Well, so they have printed, every time they've done like a graveyard mechanic that like was a keyword, not like Aftermath, which doesn't work this way. They've printed every card in the graveyard gets this ability, right? When we were in Innistrad with Flashback, they printed Pass and Flames, and Pass and Flames does something similar to this, is very powerful, but hasn't broken any format.
Yeah, I mean, it's been historically a big piece of at times tier 1 modern deck, but that's fine. But this card is like, when it gets banned in Legacy this fast, you know, like, it was off the rails. Right. It was really off the rails.
Now, I do think Modern has the ability to hate out graveyard decks that are trying to Underworld Breach better than other formats. And those cards are played more because the graveyard decks are more relevant, right? Like, I can free roll Graveyard Hate because I know I have to fight against both Underworld Breach and Dredge.
Yeah.
That's like, there's enough decks out there that like designated 4 slots on my sideboard or 3 slots on my sideboard to Graveyard Hate isn't a bad idea. And then you get into the world of like the Rakdos Charms or the like the cards like the Scavenging Oozes where Spell Bombs. Well, no, because Spell Bombs is eat a graveyard, right? That's what it's doing. Rakdos Charm has like 3 modes. One of them is Graveyard Hate. I'm saying like
modal cards that have another function.
Like the reason you play Wear Tear, right? Like you don't play Wear Tear because it's the best way to kill an artifact, but you play it because I can like bring this against Boggles. You bring this against Boggles, and I can bring it against Affinity.
Yeah, you got a creature. You got a different. Yeah.
So like Rakdos Charm has like the modularity of being able to eat a graveyard. So like I think there's just a lot of really versatile ways to fight against Underworld Breach decks in Modern. Pioneer less so, and I think it's like last time I mentioned on the episode that like Graveyard Hate in Pioneer isn't as good, which I think is true. Though they do have a lot, they have Rest in Peace, they have Leyline of the Void, they have Tormod's Crypt, but what they don't have is another like a high percentage of the field is graveyard decks.
Yeah.
So you don't need the Graveyard Hate. So it's just like a little bit less of the metagame is this, so your sideboard percentage is going to be less ways to fight this, which means that it's going to be easier to stumble once you fight Underworld Breach decks.
It's fair.
But with Legacy, the cards are just so powerful that you can like win on turn like 2 or 1.
Well, they specifically said in the article its interaction with Lion's Eye Diamond is the thing, and it makes sense because when the card was printed, everybody and their mother was just like, I mean, come on, that's like that's, discard your hand. That's a bummer.
Oh no.
Like those 2 cards together are just like wow.
Well, and when Wizards prints cards that are fine in Standard, fine in Pioneered maybe, and fine in Modern, but then too good in Legacy, then I stop kind of being like, fine.
It is interesting that when we talk about the differences between Modern and Legacy, we often will say it's Force of Will, it's Brainstorm, it's Wasteland. We don't often bring up Lion's Eye Diamond, but it is like the one card that is like, yeah, the major difference is they basically have a Black Lotus that works in certain decks, and we just don't. We don't have anything that's even close to a Black Lotus that works in certain decks. I guess we have a Lotus Bloom, kind of.
Yeah.
Ish, but
Eggs
like...
played it.
Yeah. But like...
What else played it?
Like Lion's Eye Diamond is like, when you see it work in a deck, you're like, oh yeah, you just found a deck that makes this actually Black Lotus. You just cast it from your hand, and that's what it is. So that's pretty outrageous. I don't think we have that many more thoughts on Legacy because we don't play.
I think it's more a reference to like, will this card be banned in Modern and Pioneer? And I think it's fine in both. I think Graveyard Hate in both is strong enough. I think Pioneer just has a little bit less of a reason to run Graveyard Hate, but this is the reason, right? Like,
yeah,
and like there'll be a dredge deck in that format eventually. There's a graveyard like creature based, bringing them back for value, mill yourself deck in every format.
I mean, Breach is getting played in a bunch of Modern decks. It's cool. Graveyard Hate can hate it out. It's something like a Lion's Eye Diamond that pushes a card like that into this is not fair territory. Sure. But the cost is reasonably high. You have to burn a lot of resources to make that card good.
Right.
And the decks that are doing it are fine, but there are so many good graveyard decks anyway. Modern's pretty well equipped. I think the last one that we should talk about here is Pioneer.
Sure.
There are no bannings. The article that they wrote says basically that the win percentages had adjusted. A lot of the best decks in the format had pretty good matchups against decks like Inverter, decks like Lotus Breach, that the win percentages on those top 2 or 3 decks, the third was Inverter, it was Lotus Breach, and the last one, you can look it up.
Heliod combo.
And the Heliod combo. And they were waiting for results on Heliod combo to really be consistent, but while the other two, the top decks had really good win percentages against them, and they wanted to give it a bit more time to balance out.
Sure.
It's not that's not the vibe on the street that we were getting, really. There was a lot of pretty negative vibe on the Inverter deck specifically. A lot of people were complaining about Inverter, but I also don't think Pioneer's mistake early on, I think, was all those bannings. I think, I don't know that actually, in the end, was the best thing.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about that, too. Part of it is the timing of it, right?
Yeah.
If they had, released Pioneer 2 years ago or a year from now when, the world was great. We weren't off of the most powerful 4 sets of all time.
Yeah.
Multiple bannings weren't happening every week already. This year, before even Pioneer happened, the amount of bannings in 2019 was off the charts, right? Then you add Pioneer, where every week they're just banning a card, and the fatigue of the word ban was so high that it was becoming problematic and made I think poisoned Pioneer. I think that's one of the reasons Pioneer has had so much trouble post that getting its footing. I do think that one of the reasons that they didn't ban Inverter or didn't ban Thassa's Oracle is that they're a little bit more gun shy after Splinter Twin.
Yeah.
Right? This is a close to Splinter Twin-esque deck. When you talk to players playing the deck, the skill intensity, how fun it is to play, is very high. It's a very fun deck to play, which is kind of the response a lot of people had to Splinter Twin. And one of the reasons people have 4 years later still are bemoaning that Splinter Twin was banned 5 years later. And so when you really look at the format, I think from their perspective, they're let's see what happens. It's better that Pioneer has a deck like this that is very skill intensive, a lot of cool counterplay, not impossible to fight. Other decks don't have a bad win percentage against it, and let's see where it is, and then in 4 months, see what happens. The reverse of that is that Splinter Twin had 2 years of time. I think we looked it up as exactly 2 years, right? Where it cemented itself as a pillar of the format, and then they got rid of it. Where if they had gotten rid of it right now, at least now it's that was never a part of the format.
Yeah.
People don't get used to it. So I'm worried now that if this is going to be too good in the long run, now they're allowing people to become more attached to the deck in a way that will make it a net negative when they do eventually have to ban it in the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I am excited to see where Pioneer goes. I want to know in 6 months, how do people actually feel about these new powerful strategies? Remember, Heliod just got printed. The stuff that people are Lotus Field just got printed. These are all new cards. Give it some time. It's a powerful format. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And when you look at Modern's history, some of the meta changes have happened because of bannings, and some of them just happened because people learn how to play their decks and they come up with strategies that invalidate the other ones. It takes time. You need to let the format and if it's not going to survive because people don't like it enough, it's not going to survive anyway. And so I think you got to let it sit. I'm actually okay with the lack of bannings here. I'm curious to see what happens.
I think part of it is also just buyer confidence, right? People are so gun shy with Pioneer that just another banning could kill the format, right? Like it more than any of the formats we talk about is kind of on that knife's edge of like, is this a successful experiment or not? And right now, I think it's like wobbling towards falling off of that edge, partially just due to the buying confidence and people being unwilling to buy into it until they realize how stable it is. Modern went through this period too. Early days of Modern, people were really worried about how often there were bans. For the first year, there were bans pretty regularly, especially because in that first 6 months, you had, like, the format kind of didn't exist. Then they banned a bunch of cards right before the PT, banned a bunch of cards right after PT Philly, and then a bunch of cards that December.
Yeah.
And then Bloodbraid Elf, and, like, there was cards that followed. So I'm interested to see where Pioneer ends up.
I also think it's important to point out, because some of our listeners and some of our viewers are probably newer to Magic. When I say newer, I mean, like, in the last few years. There was a period of time that we both were aware of Magic and lived through in the pre-modern days where when they introduced the new format, they didn't have the great infrastructure and support to make us all super aware of it. Like, we weren't all talking on podcasts and Twitter about it. It was kind of like the mothership. You'd read about it. That was kind of what existed, and formats would come and go. I mean, Extended was not a very, very well-loved format. They tried it for a long time. Block used to get played a lot. New Extended didn't work. Modern worked. Modern is like one of the great success stories in the history of Magic where they were like, hey, do this cool new thing. I mean, Commander was like this. It was created by, obviously, like, fans. People played it. But then they were like, we're going to support Commander. And then it became the most played format. I mean, those two have lived on where most others haven't. And Pioneer's pretty new. Fingers crossed. I want to see Pioneer work. I like the format a lot. But remember, like, we're in this growth period of a new format. This has just got birthed. We have to support it. You've got to give it some time. They haven't worked in the past. I'm hoping this one does.
Well, yeah, like look at like even on this list, Historic was kind of a little bit of a flop the first time Brawl came out, until it was like, Brawl as an arena format has been a success, but Brawl as a paper format was not successful. Even fan-made formats like Tiny Leaders, like Oathbreaker is just chugging along. Like, the amount of like formats that survive and are adopted
Highlander,
is like
Gauntlet,
really
anyone?
Low. Still kicking strong with the exact same 14 people. We've grown. Jack and Gavin, and we had some people at Magic Fest Reno be like, "Oh yeah, I'm building a wheel."
I got Professor to play a game with me.
Nice.
He played one game.
Okay.
I gave him Merfolk.
Okay, that's valid. You're the one wheel that he should be playing.
He enjoyed it, and I played Grixis against him, and he got me. He almost killed me. Almost.
You didn't let him win?
I should have. I should have let the Wookiee win.
This is my difficult way of convincing people to play games I like, as I'm too competitive. So I'm like, all right, and I win, and they're like, I don't even know what this card says. So I think like relatively safe bans. We were pretty close last week. The one miss we had was on Pioneer. I thought Thassa's Oracle would be banned.
Would be gone.
But like, Through the Breach and Legacy, Once Upon a Time was in Modern. Both of those things we kind of talked about. Do recommend going to listen to that episode. There will be an episode this week that's not this episode, so make sure to tune in. This is just the hot take. We'll also have a hot take tomorrow. Make sure to follow and subscribe.
Yeah. And I think you guys will probably see the return of 10 Minutes of Magic, my quick videos I was doing. I was out of town for a while, but I'll probably do one this week at least, if not two.
Cool.
So check those out on the channel. And we have a big Patreon announcement on the show coming this week, so tune into this week's episode. Whole rebranding of the Patreon. We're very excited about it. And thanks for watching.
I will say, if you check in, there will be the hot take that normally gets released on Mondays. It will be released on the Patreon tonight exclusively for 24 hours, and will be released publicly tomorrow. So if you want everyone in the chat that watches us live, you want to get access to that hot take, check out the Patreon in like a couple of hours.
Patreon.com/the MMcast. It's we're trying to grow the thing, guys. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys for the regular episode this week, and enjoy your games of Magic.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.